New Day with Dr. Tammy Bradshaw Scott, a program dedicated to addressing current issues and offering solutions and hope for each new day. Dr. Tammy is a registered psychologist and licensed marriage and family therapist with degrees in clinical psychology. And now, here is your host for A New Day, Dr. Tammy.
Welcome, studio audience, and those of you at home. We have a truly special show for you today, a topic that needs to remain in the public's eye, and it's a topic that demands our constant attention. Today, we will be hearing from a veteran of war who has served this wonderful country of the United States of America, and who represents thousands of men and women who have served in the armed forces. As many of you already are aware, veterans who serve in the war zones often return home with many battle wounds, both physically and psychologically. For instance, approximately 22 veterans commit suicide every day in the United States. And a recent study showed that trends of mental health diagnoses in veterans between the years 2002 and 2008, the study revealed an alarming rate of mental health diagnoses, which rose dramatically in 2003 following the invasion in Iraq. Of these veterans, 36.9% received mental health diagnoses, which primarily included depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. These are staggering numbers. And this is not the only aspect that our veterans are facing. Also, their families are suffering along with them on many levels. Before I welcome our guest to join us today, I would like to take a moment to welcome a remarkable veteran who has joined us in our studio audience today. Bob is a World War II veteran who was in the battle at Normandy, and he is a true hero. Bob, would you please stand so that we can recognize you and thank you today for your service? Thank you, Bob. It's an honor and a privilege to have you here today with us. And now, please join me in welcoming our guest today, Josh Lund. For joining us today, and it is a privilege to have you here. Thank you for serving our country and all that you have sacrificed for us.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And I'd like to begin by asking you, first of all, what branch of the armed forces did you serve?
I served in the United States Marine Corps.
Okay, right on. I love the Marines. How long did you serve?
I served 4 years active, 4 years inactive.
Okay. And how many tours were you, first of all, deployed to a war zone?
I was. During my 4 years, I deployed to Okinawa, Japan for 6 months. And then shortly after September 11th, we were deployed to Iraq about a year after that. So one combat tour in Iraq.
Okay, and you were there how long in Iraq?
We were there for about 4 months. We took Baghdad, the Marines. It was just a fast push up the middle there, and they got us out pretty quick once Baghdad fell.
Okay, and that's pretty incredible that you were there 4 months. And what was primarily your duties or job when you were there?
So I was an infantryman, specifically a mortarman, and basically what the infantry does is they take ground, hold it, and kick down doors and shoot bad guys. That's what we're all about. So that was our primary mission over in Iraq.
Okay, goodness. Now, did you obviously you had friends that you were close to. Did you all get close as you were there? Tell us a little bit about that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing about being deployed in a combat zone is you really gel and bond with those guys you're with. And it's a brotherhood. It really is. In my case, I deployed to Iraq at towards the end of my 4 years. So we had a ton of time together. I mean, literally 4 years, some of us going to boot camp together, School of Infantry, and then being deployed or being assigned to 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, which was my unit. And we just took that time, and you get close, suffering and being in those harsh conditions and training together and doing all that for, just about 4 years. And then you go to a combat zone, and it really just gels everybody together.
Josh, would you mind sharing a little bit about your experience in the combat zone and some of those things that you and your comrades, went through together?
Sure, absolutely. So we were the first infantry battalion into southern Iraq in 2003. We actually pushed across the border March 19th of 2003. The war officially kicked off on the 20th. We were the first guys in that night. Our battalion commander wanted to push us in because they had started to launch Scud missiles, and we didn't want to be targets on the border. So the battalion commander made the call to push in, and it was a wild ride from there. So one of the first objectives for our battalion was to take the oil fields, secure the oil fields in southern Iraq, and that was very important to keep the infrastructure whole and in one piece for kind of the rebuild after that. So that's what our battalion was tasked to do. We took that the first day, and it was crazy. I mean, that's the first time you're in an experience where people are shooting back at you. And it's like training for that football game. You train and practice, and then all of a sudden you're out there on the field, and it's the real deal. So from that point on, we made our way up to different points in Iraq, and with the ultimate goal being Baghdad. And that was pretty much the culmination of everything for us. I remember staging just outside of Baghdad, and just feeling like this sense of awe, like, wow, I mean, here we are, we've taken this country in such a short period of time. And I remember, actually going in, it was actually early morning, about 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and pushing in, and that's really where our unit saw the most action. And it was probably the worst possible situation you can find yourself in. You're fighting at night. We had night vision goggles, but still, you don't know what's around the corner. I mean, there are no lines. Yeah, it's that the fear is one thing. You have to keep it in check, and the training, is good because it's just repetition for years, and you just react. So our battalion going into Baghdad, we got hit. And it was about, the whole battle lasted about 12 hours, about 2 o'clock in the morning to about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it was intense. It was very, very intense.
Probably the worst 12 hours.
Yeah, it was probably the worst. It's kind of a weird thing. It's like the worst 12 hours and the best 12 hours of your life. I tell this to people, they ask what combat is like. And it's, I'd say 95% boredom, and that other 5% is just absolute sheer terror. And it's something that you'll never get to taste outside of that experience. So life just kind of becomes, after that experience, life becomes a little vanilla, if you will, and everything's kind of just seen in a different context and perspective.
That makes sense. I could definitely understand that. Now, when you were there in that 12 hours and the time leading up to that, what were some of did you have any thoughts about like your family, things going on like that, or were you just so in that moment?
Yeah, you're really focused on, the task at hand. So I was a sergeant and a squad leader at that point. So my responsibility, my family at that point are the men in my squad. And so, the best thing you can do to be thinking of them and preparing them is getting their heads in the game and getting ready for what's about to happen. So you're going over, your plans of attack and, casualty evacuation if that's, an option. And so you as a leader, you take on a lot of responsibility. And I was, at that point, just a 22-year-old kid.
Oh my goodness.
And so, these
22.
22 years old, and leading other kids into battle, and it's just it's incredible. It's kind of an incredible thing. So,
What, if you wouldn't mind sharing one of the most difficult parts of that battle?
Sure. I think for us, once the attack hit, I mean, it was just, we were being hit on all sides. It was all fronts, from rooftops, windows, alleys. And I mean, we're talking, within, 20 yards distance. I mean, we're driving down one of the main highways, and it's like everywhere you looked, there was a muzzle flash. That in and of itself is a frightening thing.
Now you said
a muzzle flash.
What is that?
So a muzzle flash is the flash of light that comes out of the end of a weapon.
Oh,
so AK-47s, they shoot, and there's a big flash of light at the end. So all these muzzle flashes everywhere you look, and it's shocking, but the training kicks in. So you engage, wherever you can. In my vehicle, we were riding in Amtrak's, which is it's a big, almost like an armored personnel carrier. It carries all the Marines, on the beach, and the ramp goes down, that type of vehicle. We were all positioned out of the very top of it, and covering, left and right. And I remember I guess the scariest time for me was when our vehicle was hit multiple times by rocket-propelled grenades. And these things are, notorious for, entering a vehicle, punching through, and then, exploding and killing everybody inside. I got hit, a direct hit, literally it exploding in my face, and knocking me down into the vehicle twice during that attack that early morning. And I remember just feeling this sense of helplessness. And the one thing that you always hear, in training is you can't call a timeout in combat. You can't call timeout in war. So you have to push. You have to push through, and you have to be strong for your men, because they're looking to your leadership. So, sitting down and taking a timeout, it's not an option. You have to be there. You have to be present, and you have to be effective. So, but yeah, so all that kind of coming to a head right at that point, I remember crying out to the Lord and just saying, God, grant me strength through this. And that's the only thing I could do, and fire back.
Wow.
And
how did you survive that? I mean, getting hit, being knocked down twice.
Yeah, it's I mean, the only thing I can say is it's by the grace of God. And a good old Marine Corps training.
Right on.
and the will to, not let your buddies down.
Yes.
I mean, that's constantly going through your head. You don't want to sit down. You don't want to, because any of those guys in that vehicle could have sat down and said, I'm done. Somebody else can stand up and fight. But we didn't. I mean, we couldn't get enough guys standing out of the top. Everybody wanted to fight. And so that's just. It's just kind of it was a special day in more ways than one.
Okay. Josh, can I ask you, did you lose anyone close to you? First of all, it's just miraculous that you're here, and I believe that God's hand was definitely on you, for sure. But was there anyone close to you that you lost?
Yeah, so not that night, but on another deployment. After I got out, my battalion deployed back to Iraq. And they went to Fallujah, and it was the first round of Fallujah where they strung the contractors up on the bridge, and it was our response to that. So anyway, Noah Boy was his name, and he lost his life. He lost his life in that battle.
I'm so sorry, so very sorry. True hero,
Absolutely.
All of you, absolute heroes. He will always be remembered for his heroism. So. Now, Josh, kind of fast forwarding here a bit, as you've gone through unbelievable experience that I and many of us could never imagine, how have you managed, and what has been some, if any, issues for you coming back home after all of that?
Sure. I think one of the biggest things for me, it took me about 3 years to level out. I mean, you're never really the same after an experience like that. But it took me about 3 years to really calm down. My life was spiraling out of control, in more ways than one. I was trying to get back into school and get a degree. And I mean, literally, we got back from Iraq, and I was in a classroom setting, 2 months later. And, it was very, very tough. You basically have to turn another side of your brain on and shut another one off, because you're in combat mode, you're in leading Marine mode, and then all of a sudden now you have to sit still in a classroom all day. And
Very difficult.
yeah, so it was really, really tough. I during that point of time I had definitely contemplated suicide. And I remember there was a point at which I reached, and it was this this absolute feeling of despair. And then it was like the Lord spoke to me and said, "I have a purpose for you. I have a purpose for your life, and I spared your life for a reason." And so I always go back to that. I always remember that specific day, and that's what I draw strength from. And so far, I've been out for 13 years, and it's been tough. It's been really tough. I've gotten married, and I have 2 beautiful kids, beautiful wife, and it's hard for them to, fully understand what that experience did to me. My wife didn't know me prior to this, and so so she sees post-Iraq Josh, and that's all she's known. But one of the things that I really want to stress is when you come back from a combat zone, you're not the same person, and that's one of the things that I really struggled with my friends and family. They thought that, okay, Josh is back, let's just get going again. Life just picks up where it stopped when he left, and that's not the case at all. I'm changed. I'm different. I've seen things that nobody should have to see, and nobody should have to fear for their life, constantly. And it changes you.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the specific areas that you've been affected? It changes you overall as your person, I imagine, because there's no going back to this previous experience.
Right.
And so once you've experienced all the trauma that you were experiencing and exposed to, now there's no going back.
Right.
And so this has changed your person. What are some specific ways that you struggle or have struggled in the past?
So I've been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury. And so some of the things that I deal with on a daily basis. I can't stand being around crowds. I go on high alert, and I'm just hyper vigilant. I haven't really slept. I joke with people, and I talk to them about how well I sleep at night, which is not well at all. And I tell them I can count the number of times I've slept great on 2 hands in 13 years. And it's just I can't sleep. I can't fall asleep with my back to the wall or to the door. It's just this constant vigilance. Nightmares, things like that. Just certain movies just trigger me. I just can't do certain things. 4th of July, I have to sit it out. And my wife, takes our kids to go watch the fireworks, because it takes me back. It takes me back to Iraq.
I imagine so. And your wife is, very supportive of you, and but how do you manage and cope, on a day-to-day? What do you do, and what has been your path for taking care of yourself and healing some of those wounds as a result of the trauma?
I'd say my faith, really. That's been probably the primary thing, and just really pouring out my heart. And letting the Lord fix and heal and mend as time goes on. I think also being able to share with other veterans and having that like I mentioned, the brotherhood, You know, we still meet with a lot of our guys from our platoon. And, you know, we talk and joke, and it's like we relive these stories. It's like we're back in the barracks again. You know, we pick up right where we left off. And I find that that's real helpful. You know, some people, you know, feel like they can't talk about it and they want to keep it bottled up inside. For me, it was just the opposite. I felt like the more I could talk about it and the more I could, you know, express verbally, you know, my emotions and how I'm feeling, I felt like that was, you know, there was healing in that.
Yes.
And so, you know, when I had the opportunity like this, or speaking in, you know, front of, you know, a school or you know, a church group or something like that, and really, you know, share my experience, I feel like that, you know, that really helps. Yes. That really helps, you know, bring to light, you know, what we've all gone through, what we continue to go through, and just gives people a perspective.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and that's very important, something you said there, which is as you talk about it and as you share your experience and the more you talk about it, you know, that's very helpful. And as a therapist, that is exactly what I try to get folks to do when they have been exposed to trauma resulting in PTSD, especially folks like yourself who have been deployed into a war zone and have gone through this. The more they can talk about it and share their experience, it does help in bringing that healing. And staying connected with your comrades and your friends is so very important. So I'm so glad you're doing that. And I believe also that, as you said earlier in the interview, that you believe God spared your life for a reason, and this is part of that reason. And I feel very blessed and honored that He would do that, just to have this one moment. Of course, He's using your life in many ways, I know, and being able to help and share like this brings hope for other people. Absolutely. And knowing that they can, even though, as we said, there's no going back to what you were before, right. But you are very well functioning and helping others, and that means so much. So in closing, I'd like to talk about, because I know that you want to see other veterans be able to live whole lives and be able to heal from those wounds and be able to function in the way you are, and not a lot of them are. As I shared in the beginning in our introduction, that, you know, approximately 22 veterans take their life every day in the U.S., and that's just unbelievable. And that's in addition to the mental illness that they're suffering in terms of depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxieties. We call it, you know, mental illness, but it's all of those diagnoses that, unless they're treated, then they don't do well. And so they need to get the right treatment. And one of those issues, and why we talk about this, is because we want to help as many veterans as we can be able to have a life again. So, Josh, would you take just a moment and share with us, after going through everything you've gone through, what would you like to see happen for our men and women who are coming back with the trauma that you've experienced?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. What I would like to see, obviously, is, you know, communities wrap their arms around their veterans. Yeah. You know, having, you know, somebody tell you thank you for your service on Veterans Day, that's great. You know, that's cool. And somebody, you know, asks about, you know, your military service, and they appreciate you like that. But I think it's more than words. And it's really, you know, wrapping your arms around these men and women who have sacrificed so much, some the ultimate sacrifice. You know, these guys and gals will never be the same again. And like you said in the intro, you know, some of us are scarred physically, some of us are scarred mentally. I think all of us are scarred mentally. We all have a degree of injury that we need to, you know, overcome. And I think, you know, having the community, you know, come together, and you may ask, well, what does that look like? I think, you know, having some type of, you know, one-on-one, and I'm speaking to veterans too, you know, guys who have been there, who have been able to make it through and, you know, live a relatively successful life, you know, grabbing these guys as they're coming out of the military and really just pouring themselves into these people. I mean, you know, a lot of the problems I see are men and women coming out that experience and not having a purpose or not being able to see how they can use the skills that they learned. I mean, and a lot of them character skills, you know, the invaluable things that they've you know, learned in the military, and apply those in, you know, a career.
Yes.
So taking them, grabbing veterans and saying, hey, let's get you work, you know, and really you know, bringing them into the fold, into, you know, civilian life as best as we can.
Absolutely. And I couldn't have said it better myself, Josh. Thank you so much. You know, and with that said, after hearing from Josh, our veteran today, and knowing the tragic statistics that our veterans face, there is simply no question that we all need to be a part of the solution to help our veterans and to help their families. The wonderful news is that we can help if we get involved and come together. We can make a difference. We can put an end to this terrible epidemic facing our veterans. Please support our local veterans groups. Get involved. Know what the needs are, like Josh just said. And also, let's hold our elected officials accountable and our veteran administrations for them to take better care of our vets. We can absolutely make a difference if we all get involved. Well, this concludes our time together today. I want to thank our guest, Josh, for joining us today. And I want to thank everyone for being here today in our live studio audience and at home, and for joining us today and sharing on a new day. Thank you.
This viewer-supported program is made possible by viewers like you. Your support is invaluable and appreciated. To send a gift or for more information, please contact Dr. Tammy at the address on your screen. And thank you for joining us for A New Day.